Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breakout Session D1, the Sustainable World Kitchen Culinary Stage, Plant Forward Korea. We are thrilled to have two amazing chefs joining us today. We have Polly Sang from San Francisco, California, joining us, along with Hooni Kim joining us from Seoul, Korea. Our first presenter is going to be Polly Sang, Cuisine's Culinary Program Manager at Pinterest. And Polly is a Cordon Bleu grad with an extensive culinary career ranging from catering, owning her own restaurant, to corporate dining, which led her to her current position at Pinterest. We'll be talking to Polly in just a moment, but first we're going to watch a short video of Polly preparing Korean mung bean pancakes known as bindaeseok. Okay.
Hello, I'm here to demonstrate Korean kimchi bindaeseok recipe today, the base of which is ground, soaked, peel-dried mung beans. Okay, I said it in one shot. Okay, here is the dried yellow split mung beans that I soaked overnight, which will then make it double. And I put it in the blender already. And I'm just gonna angle the camera so you can get a good view of what is going to happen in there. So 2 cups in here. I have a 1/4 cup of yellow onions. These are my aromatics. Couple cloves of crushed garlic. This is a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and another 1/4 teaspoon, so 3/4 cups of salt, 1/2 cup of water, and 2 tablespoons of sesame oil, and that gets blended. So we pureed the beans for about 30 seconds, not too long, and it looks really nice. It's kind of like sandy in texture, a bit like a pancake batter, but maybe a little bit thicker. So that looks good. So let's talk about the filling. Traditionally, there's some pork product in here. We can use ground pork or diced pork, minced pork, but we're keeping it vegetarian today. And so I have mung bean sprouts in here, about 1 cup. I have 2 cups of julienne kimchi. The riper, the better. And we want to make sure and put in all the juice that comes out of there in here, because that's flavor. And about 1/2 cup of green onions. Sorry, these green onions are not that green, but greener the better on those as well. And here is our filling, our base, our bean base. I'm just gonna dump in here. Sorry, get the best camera angle here, and then just mix it really well, and it's ready to go. This is it. Without any additional binder, it will cook up really, really nicely. And you see all the juices coming out of there. I like to let it sit for about 30 minutes. It'll just kind of have the mung beans wilt a little bit in the batter, so it'll be a little bit easier to incorporate. I do have some already done here, waiting, and as you can see, the liquid, there's a bit of liquid that seeps out, but that's okay. You just kind of mix it, incorporate the liquid into the batter, and then go ahead and put it into your hot pan. And I have a couple of patties already cooking in here. Turn the heat up. Yes, I'm using a butane burner. My stove is broken. So just a nice spoonful. I would say that's about a 2-ounce portion. And then just kind of press it and shape it into a pretty round circle. And I have some different points of doneness here for demonstration. And then flip it over. This one was a little underdone, but this one looks great. It looks perfect. And then once that's all cooked through, it's ready to be served. And I have a sample platter here for you. Korean bindaeseok with a dipping sauce, which is 2 parts soy sauce and 1 part distilled vinegar. And there you go. Bon appetit.
Thank you so much, Polly. Sorry, I was about to say Sandy. To transfer to this session. Hi, Polly. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So this was awesome. I loved how you showed us every stage of cooking the pancakes. Super helpful. Tell us a little bit more about how you use this in your operation. And I know you've got some other variations to tell us about as well.
Okay, so in my corporate dining world, I have a very captive and engaged audience and customer base, and they eat with us almost every day, and some people eat there multiple times a day. So it's really important for us to menu and inclusive menu items. Inclusive meaning we want to make sure that everybody with all their dietary restrictions have something to eat. So if we can come up with something that is super tasty, that is vegan and clean, meaning like no other allergens in there, it's really menu for that kind of audience. So this fits in really, really well with that. And then this also has led me to think about, what do we do for breakfast? There aren't any good alternatives for vegan breakfast items. So I use this with lentils and made a breakfast patty to serve at breakfast times. And that recipe is also provided.
Yes, I should remind everybody in the audience that you'll see in the chat, we've got the link to the recipes along with the password. And the password and that link and the password was also in the email that we sent to you earlier this week. So if you want to take a look at that recipe, and Polly included both the traditional recipe in there as well as that lentil and walnut variation. Polly, in terms of the lentil variation, do the lentils function very similarly to the mung beans, or do you have to make kind of adjustments in the recipe to kind of get them to that same binding state and that same texture?
Great question. So when I did this recipe, I was thinking, well, maybe people won't have access to the split mung beans. So I tried it with the lentils and it worked really, really great. Same principle, soak it overnight, it will double overnight, and then just blend it. And it just releases enough starch so that it binds by itself. So you could add any flavor profile in there. I even did one where it's just kind of julienne, fennel, and carrots and things like that, a lot of fresh herbs, and made kind of think of like a pakora almost, but without any of the flour or anything like that. And it cooked up really, really well as well. It just kind of holds really well together. So there's a lot of applications, I think.
And do you, I suppose calling them pancakes kind of makes us think of breakfast, right? But it also just sort of refers to the form. Do you tend to keep it on a breakfast menu? Or actually, what I love about this, maybe I should reveal my real intentions here in this question. What I love about this is that it feels really versatile across day parts, right? That we're bringing in something new and some new interesting flavors and new items that really seems to work for breakfast, but it also seems like it could be adapted to other day parts.
Oh, we could totally do that. You could put some crab in there and make it high end and make it an appetizer. You could also make it bigger and make it into a vegan burger patty as well.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that, vegan patty. And another question I have for you, we're about to hear about a little bit more about kimchi in a little bit from Hooni. And he talks about how to make that kimchi. Do you do the kimchi in-house at your operation?
No, we do not. We should, but we do not. We do have a really great local vendor that we purchase from. Can I give her a plug?
Sure.
It's called Sinto Gourmet, and we've become really, really great friends just through business. And her kimchi is available at Cisco, and it's also a vegan product, very clean as well. So awesome. And very tasty.
Thanks for letting us know about that. In terms of the preparation, so you're not doing the in-house kimchi, but in terms of preparation for a large volume, a high volume kind of operation, feeding many people, prep, that kind of thing. Do you have some tips in terms of the recipe, in terms of things that could be made ahead or big batches?
Let's see. No, I mean, the blender might be a little bit too hard. It would be a little time consuming to do in the blender. So we would use a big food processor to do it in. So that would be another adaptation. If you could make it a little bit wetter and maybe use a burr mixer and do it right out of a bucket, that might work as well. I haven't tried that, but that might work as well. And also too, if you don't get the beans ground super fine like I did, if it could be a little chunkier, it'll just, I mean, a little bit more coarse. And the texture, the end texture will be a little bit different, but it'll be more like a falafel almost.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another option as well. And also, if you make the filling a day before, it's better the next day. Like it just kind of melts together a little bit better. It's easier to handle. Not that it's difficult to handle, but yeah.
But it makes it a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to come back to you in a little bit, Polly, for some additional questions. So if you do have questions, please join it or stay with us, and we're going to come back to Polly for some questions. But we'll say bye to Polly for now. First, before we come back to questions with Polly, we're going to be chatting with Hooni Kim, who's the chef owner of Handan, Korean Tavern, and Danji, which was the first Korean restaurant in America to earn a Michelin star. He's also the author of the newly released My Korea book, and he's joining us today from actually Seoul. I was going to have to pronounce another Korean town, Gangneung. I had practiced it, Gangneung, but it sounds like you're back in Seoul today. Yes, welcome, Hooni. And for those of you who can do the math in terms of the time zone change, Hooni is joining us somewhere in the middle of the night in Korea. So thanks for staying up with us, Hooni.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It is almost 3 a.m. here, but that's okay. I got up at 6 a.m. Filmed all day. A little bit tired, but I'll be fine.
Great. Well, let's jump into your presentation here.
Yeah, I'm here to talk about kimchi. But before I do that, I need to sort of explain what kimchi or how it plays a role in Korean food culture or Korean dining. What you see now is a picture of a traditional Korean dining room table at home. Individually, what we get when we sit around a dining table is we each get a bowl of rice. And everything else that's in the middle of the table is considered banchan. So it's shared, family style, of course. And it can consist of large plates of meat, little bowls of vegetables, might be sometimes a stew boiling on a tableside grill. But all of that is considered banchan in a Korean home. Very different. Next slide, if you can see. Probably what Americans consider banchan, or how we know banchan in the US, is the little free side dishes that come for free when you go to a Korean restaurant and order your entrees. And that's the same in Korea when you go to restaurants, where banchan is not the meat that you order or the large stews that you order. It is the free side dishes that come on the side. But in Korea, it's the same word that just used differently within a certain context. And whether it's home or at a restaurant, there's always a kimchi. Koreans are just used to having kimchi breakfast, lunch, and dinner with meat, fish, stew, and everything. So now that you know how much we love kimchi here in Korea, let me explain what it actually is. Next slide. There it is. It's a Korean lady cutting up kimchi. Kimchi is not a dish. It's not something very specific. It really is. It's a technique. It's a technique of fermentation. We can ferment Napa cabbage, which is the traditional kimchi, radishes, other vegetables, ramps, scallions, anything that we ferment to promote probiotics and to prevent it from spoiling, we consider kimchi. And it's very important. We can make certain vegetables to taste very similar to kimchi, but when there isn't that fermentation, it shouldn't be called a kimchi. The reason why Koreans ferment, the act of fermentation promotes the probacteria that prevents the bad bacteria, I guess molds and other bacteria that can actually help decompose the vegetables where it becomes, well, not nutritious and not really good for you to eat. So the probacteria prevents that, and that's why we make kimchi, to preserve vegetables as long as we can. I will share with you a recipe of how to make the traditional Napa cabbage kimchi. Next slide. We start out with half a slice of Napa cabbage. It's a beautiful picture. Next. The first picture on the left, you'll see the actual salt, and we use that to brine the kimchi. Traditionally 8 to 12 hours, sometimes a little bit longer, but after we brine it overnight, we rinse it out, squeeze all the water out possible, and it's very important to taste the kimchi, the cabbage right now, because the flavor of the cabbage should be pretty aggressively seasoned, but not overly salty and not overly bland, because the marinade that comes on, it's really not supposed to season. What it's supposed to is it's supposed to flavor the kimchi. So if we go to the next slide. After the marinade is put on, it'll sort of look like that on the left. It has not been fermented yet, so you can't even call that a kimchi yet. After 2 weeks, it usually starts fermenting after a week. And I like my kimchi pretty young. So after 2 weeks, that's what it looks like on the right. And it's really good to sort of eat just like that. It'll be full of probiotics. It'll have a nice crunch. It'll have a nice sweetness. It won't have a lot of deep flavor because, next slide. Kimchi can, the flavors of kimchi can just grow. 12-week kimchi is great to cook with. Picture on your right will be, it's a 1-year kimchi. And 1-year kimchi, it becomes very sour. And when kimchi can sort of be over fermented. And over fermenting just means that the probiotics, the bacteria, the good bacteria is starting to go away. And when the probacteria starts going away, the bad bacteria starts coming in, and that starts the decomposition. And the best way to find out if your kimchi is basically too overly done is when the texture of the cabbage starts getting mushy. A good fermented kimchi will still hold that crunch. I've had kimchi that was 10 years old, still had that really nice crunchy bite. That's a good fermented kimchi. When it's mushy, then the bad bacteria has started taking over and it started decomposing, and it's not going to be as healthy. I think there's a video in there somewhere that we can show. Traditionally in Korea, we only make kimchi once a year. It could be a family, it could be a village. This is a video of me. I come to Korea once a year every November, and we make kimchi. I think this was November of last year. We made 4,000 heads of cabbage, and we make so much because most of the kimchi is actually left to ferment, and we start using it only starting from the 4th year, because the whole idea of making this kimchi at this place is we treat patients to promote their gut biome after surgery, after a sickness, so that the nutrition after we consume food can, promote our health. Next is storing kimchi. The act of marinating the cabbage does not make a kimchi. It's the actual storing of it that promotes the fermentation. A couple of key issues. Have to have it airtight. If you see, you'll see the plastic bag that's tied on top. What we do is we also cover it with a black plastic bag because we don't want any oxygen, we don't want any light. And we store it in a special walk-in fridge in my restaurant that keeps the temperature between 33 to 37 degrees. And we rarely open the door just because any sort of change, a little slight change in temperature will, I wouldn't say mess up the fermentation. Of course, you can always ferment in your fridge, but the flavors, the fermentation happening evenly all over the whole entire kimchi will be a little bit off. So especially if you want to ferment for a long time, best way is not to disturb it by opening the door. Next. Cooking with kimchi, my favorite part. Kimchi is so powerful and it has such a long shelf life in that with different ages of kimchi, you can make different dishes. At anything over a month, I love to make stews with it because the flavor is so prevalent that it's enough to season the entire broth and all the tofu and the meat that goes with it. Next picture. This is, it's an 8-year fermented kimchi with a Jeju black-haired pork belly or pork hocks that I go to Jeju 4 or 5 times a year just to have this dish from the person that inspires my Korean cooking and has taught me how to cook Korean food and what Korean food means to me for a very long time. Inspiring dish. Next. Kimchi pancake. Very similar to what Polly made. Polly's, her binder is mung beans. This uses more flour. But yeah, I think that's it. Huh. That's my book.
Well, we don't want to forget talking about your book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your book, Hooni?
Yeah, the title, My Korea, it's not a possessive My Korea. It basically means what Korean food means to me. And I think, Korean food 50 years ago, it was about not chefs in restaurants, it was about mothers cooking healthy food for their families. Deliciousness was it was a second factor, meaning the food had to be delicious so the family could have their nutrition. But with Korean food, when you use the natural ingredients, especially the 3 changs, the fermented ingredients, the soy sauce, the doenjang, and the gochujang, the food just is flavorful. And this book sort of shows you how to go back to that, escaping all the chemical man-made products that makes cooking easier, shorter, but not as healthy.
Awesome. Thank you. And such a great plug for later on after this session in the expo section of the platform. Hooni will be doing a Meet the Author booth. So you can go in there and directly talk to Hooni and we'll have a link there also to buy the book. Let's bring Polly back for a discussion. And again, as a reminder, we've got a little bit of time here for questions with both Hooni and Polly. Feel free to enter questions in the chat, or if you're brave and want to join us here on stage, just click on that share audio and video button and we'll bring you up here to ask your questions. Hooni, I wanted to jump in and tie something you were talking about and also ask Polly. You talked about sort of the evolution of appetite, so to speak, for Korean flavors and Korean food that you've seen in American consumers. Obviously, that's sort of lended to the success of your restaurant. Polly, you're able in your corporate dining to put these Korean-inspired dishes there. I wonder if both of you could just talk from your experience about how you've seen the growth of Korean food happen in the States in the past few years.
Should I go, Polly, or
Go ahead.
I'll go. Korean barbecue. The traditional sweet, salty, garlicky scent of meat, fatty meat being cooked tableside. it encompasses fills the whole room, whole dining room of beautiful aromas that gets people hooked. It was more of a social atmosphere too, cooking together with your party to eat. I think culturally that got people interested in Korean food. And all the little banchans that come with the balance of a different chord of spicy, sweet, fermented, funky, all of this. It's just very different from Japanese, Chinese, or even Thai flavors. So it was for Americans a unique flavor profile that they got to experience in a very different social atmosphere. And still, I think that got Korean food popular, but the flavors itself has taken over.
And it sort of sounds like that I love what you're saying in terms of, the meat, the barbecue, the social atmosphere kind of got people in, but it's now creating the platform for chefs like both of you to kind of open people's eyes up to Korean cuisine as something beyond barbecue. It's not just, the meat on the grill. There's this whole world of plant-forward Korean cuisine that builds on those flavor profiles and is delicious.
Yeah, a lot of people approach me and talk about and tell me that they perceive Korean food to be more healthy than Chinese food because there isn't that walking with a lot of oil, and it is a lot of vegetables. It's so easy to be a vegan or vegetarian in a Korean with a Korean cultural diet, traditional diet. And the popularity, I don't know when it started. I think it started in the early 2000s, maybe the 90s. I know all growing up, I always wanted it to be popular, but it wasn't very popular. But now it's such an easy sell. People really love it. They all know about the vegetables and the probiotics with all the kimchi and stuff. So people are really digging it. I've done a couple of kimchi, how to make kimchi at Pinterest, and it always sells out. People just are hankering for it.
I will say when pandemic started, I didn't go sourdough starter, but I immediately started doing kimchi. Like I tried the fermentation thing. So, and it also sort of felt, psychologically like I'm arming my gut with this good bacteria to fight off any sickness. We actually have somebody who was brave and hit their share audio. Let's see, or share audio and video. Let's see if it looks like Kisuk is going to join us, but maybe not. Maybe somebody got a little bit shy in the end. We'll see if they end up joining us. We do have a question from Manisha about traditionally kimchi specific containers and if that's still in practice.
Yes. Well, so traditionally it's filled in these clay jars called hangari or jangtok or whatever, and it's buried underground to keep the temperature constant. It's rarely buried underground, put in, but it's very rarely put in underground, but it is still put in these jars that are breathable and put into walk-in refrigerators in Korea.
And a lot of Koreans have Korean refrigerators that are separate from their main refrigerator, which has a slightly elevated temperature.
Yeah, and you talk about that in your book as well, Hooni, right? In terms of the way that the kimchi refrigerator keeps the temperature in a way that a traditional refrigerator doesn't.
Yes, and it's a requisite when you get married. I think every new couple gets one. They get a
I wish I had known
TV
about that when I got married, so that I could have gotten my own refrigerator. I love that.
And that's just how important kimchi is in Korean life.
I do have a very specific question, and I'm going to be selfish in asking this question. So, Hooni, you showed the whole cabbage or the half of the cabbage being brined and then marinated as that whole cabbage. I've seen some recipes where you're able to chop the cabbage before you sort of marinate it. Is there a difference between the two, or is there something different that happens in fermentation?
Chopping it up makes everything much easier, but it will not ferment for a long time. There are medicinal reasons, there are flavor reasons to actually want to ferment for months, years. And if you want to do that, even, I don't even cut it into quarters. I keep it into halves, and it makes a healthier, steadier fermentation. And the decomposition happens later on when the cabbages are kept bigger.
Awesome. Thank you.
And it's prettier when you cut it afterwards.
It is. I feel like it's also more impressive to kind of be
Yeah.
like, I fermented this whole thing as opposed to the little bits. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time already, but we're not totally, sorry, I should say, we are out of time, but I'm actually going to ask Hooni and Polly, this is a bit of a surprise for them. I've got a couple of notes I need to say about our breakout sessions, but I'm hoping that when I come back to you, you can tell us in about 6 words, no more than 6 words, encapsulate plant-forward Korean cuisine for us. The one thing you sort of want, the 6 words you want our attendees to take away this for today from plant-forward Korean cuisine. I'll give you some time to think about that. With just some announcements, we want to thank our break sponsor, Land O'Lakes, and they're actually going to be doing a special presentation during this break, a session on sensory evaluation, and that's over in the sessions tab. Don't forget that you can go into the networking tab to do one-on-one networking 4-minute video chats with other attendees today. We've also got sponsors doing great culinary demos, trends presentations, and offering really insightful videos over in the expo section, which is also where you'll find Hooni's Meet the Author stand. And don't forget that if you engage in all these great networking activities over the 6 weeks of Menus of Change, you'll get a chance to win travel and registration to next year's Menus of Change in Hyde Park. All right, Polly, your 6 words to leave people with for Korean cuisine.
Okay, essential, tasty, healthy, healing, popular, and kimchi.
Love it. Love it. Hooni, your 6 words.
I actually have a phrase.
Okay.
6-word phrase.
4-word phrase.
Okay.
Make kimchi your habit.
Oh, I love
Nice.
it. I love it. Perfect. Make kimchi your habit. I don't remember all 6 words. Kimchi, tasty, healthy, essential. Thank you so much, Hooni and Polly, for joining us this week. Everybody should go hang out with Hooni in the Meet the Author session as well. And then we'll see you back on the main stage after this networking break. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Jackie. Bye.